Hello, everyone, and welcome back to our virtual Mishnah Berurah share. We're holding a Mishnah Berurah Chelik Daled Emir Hashem. Today, we will be learning Daf Reish Lamed Ches Amud Aleph. We pick up today on the bottom of Reish Lamed Zayin Amud Beis with a brand new Siman, Siman Shin Ayin Aleph. Siman Shin Ayin Aleph, continuing to learn the halachas of Eruvei Chatzeros. Our learning today should be a schus refuah shalema for Achi Agadol Ben Shemer Ben Esther Fradel, Yitzchak Ben Tzion Ben Dusha, Rivka Bas Shira Leah, Chava Hadassah Bas Rezel Serel, Yeshua Levi Ben Ahuva Malka Chana. They should all have a refuah shalema b'sai Shachar Yisrael. Our learning should be a schus. The Rebbeinu Shalom should watch over all of our brothers and sisters who find themselves in harm's way. B'chal Makom Shehem, amongst them Yoel Ben Michal, Moshe Aaron Ben Zisel Udel, Ruven Yisrael Ben Tamar. Rebbeinu Shalom should watch over every member of Klal Yisrael. B'chol Makom Shehem. Okay, so going into Siman Shin Ayin Aleph, I'm going to do something just a drop different. Long-time listeners to the share know that I am incredibly fond of the Aruch HaShulchan. It's interesting that lately I've used the Aruch HaShulchan quite a bit in preparation, but I haven't found myself directly quoting the Aruch HaShulchan that often in the halachas of Eruvei Chatzeros. But the Aruch HaShulchan has a way of distilling things down to their essential elements in a very concise, clear fashion. I just want to read a few lines from the very beginning of Siman Shin Ayin Aleph in the Aruch HaShulchan. So the Aruch HaShulchan says, Dira B'loi Bailim. If we have a home that is considered empty, what's the phrase that we use when we have somebody who owns a home, he lives somewhere else, an absentee landlord. He's got a home in a chutzner, but he doesn't live there. He lives somewhere else. So this is an empty home. Dira B'loi Bailim, a home that is B'loi Bailim. Now, B'loi Bailim without owners doesn't mean that it's ownerless. It doesn't mean that it's an abandoned property. It doesn't mean that it's hefker. It means that there's nobody living in it. So Ruvain owns this home in Chutzner A, but he lives a long time far away. He lives somewhere else. Maybe it's a vacation home that he uses once in a while. So right now, in the context of Eruvei Chatzeros, this is a Dira B'loi Bailim. Dira B'loi Bailim lav shma dira. We don't look at it as being a residence in the chutzner. We're not machshav it as a home in the chutzner. Dira B'loi Bailim lav shma dira ve'ena iseres al b'nei chutzner. And therefore this home does not aser on the other b'nei chutzner. So you have a chutzner that has 10 homes in it, and one of them is empty because the owner is somewhere else, right? This home does not aser on the other b'nei chutzner because it's a Dira B'loi Bailim. Lefikach, therefore, says Aruch HaShulchan, Echad mibnei chutzner she'niach beisai v'halach lechutzner acheres. If you have somebody who lives in this chutzner and he left his home, v'halach lechutzner acheres, he went to a different chutzner, v'lo hiniach shum ish beveisai, he didn't leave anybody. So it's not pshat that the parents went away for Shabbos to get a little bit of a retreat and they left their 6 kids in the home for Shabbos. No, they left. The house is empty. This house is not going to aser on the other b'nei chutzner. This house does not have to be part of the Eruvei Chatzeros. Against that backdrop, says the Mechaber, Siman Shin Ayin Aleph Sif Aleph. Echad b'nei chutzner, if you have somebody who lives in the chutzner. So Ruvain has a house in the chutzner. She'eniach beisai, he left the house. V'halach v'shavas b'chutzner acheres, and he's going to spend Shabbos in a different chutzner. Says the Mechaber, afilu hoisa smucha lachatzeroi, even if the place that he's going for Shabbos is very close by. So again, he owns a home in Chutzner A. He left Chutzner A for Shabbos. His whole family packed up and left to go to a Shabbos Sheva Brachas. So they left Chutzner A. Now the place that they're going maybe is very close by. It might even be within walking distance of Chutzner A on Shabbos. But they left. They went away for Shabbos. Im hisiach miliboy, if they made this decision that they're mesiach das, they're not planning on coming back. Ve'ein daiter lachza leveisa b'Shabbos. They have no plans. They went away for a Shabbos Sheva Brachas. They have no plans on coming back to Chutzner A on Shabbos. Ve'ein daiter lachza leveisa b'Shabbos. Harei ze eina oiser aleim. He's not going to aser on the other B'nai HaChotzer. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut an aleph back at Reish Lamed Zayin and Beis, Echad B'nai Chotzer. The Vatam, the reason for this halacha is, like we saw in the Aruch HaShulchan, the dira b'loy bailim lo yishma dira ve'ena iseres b'chotzer. We now look at this dira as being a dira b'loy bailim. Now again, it does not mean, don't translate that as a dira without owners. That's not what it means. It means a dira without the owners being present. Of course the dira is owned. Of course Ruvain owns the dira, but Ruvain went away for Shabbos. So right now it's a dira, and it's a dira that's owned by one of the Bnei HaChotzer, but it's B'loi Bailim. The Bailim are not here. A dira B'loi Bailim does not author on the Bnei HaChotzer. Av shalei nosta chelik be'erev. Even if they did not join in the Eruv Chatzeros for this Shabbos. Doesn't matter. It's a dira b'loi bailim. It's an empty home. The owners are not here for Shabbos. It doesn't aser on the other b'nei HaChotzer. He left his house. He left his house and he went away. Like we saw in the Aruch HaShulchan, this means that he took his whole family with him. He didn't leave anybody in the house. And right now we're talking about a case where he left on Erev Shabbos. He left before Shabbos began. Maybe he left on Wednesday. Maybe he left on Thursday. The point is he left before the onset of Shabbos. When Shabbos came in, his home was a dira b'loi bailim. His home does not aser on the other b'nei HaChotzer. There are those that are more makel and say that even if he left on Shabbos, at that point he doesn't aser on the other b'nei HaChotzer anymore. Okay, that's the Mishnah Berurah on what we did so far. Now, there's very interesting words that we just read here in the Mechaber, and that is on the very top line of Reish Lamed Ches Amud Aleph. The words of the Mechaber were, when is this true? When does this halacha apply? Im hisiach maliboy, if he was mesiach das on being in the chotzer for Shabbos. Ve'ein daiter lachzer lebeisa b'Shabbos. He has no das to come back. So let's try to visualize this scenario. You have a chotzer, 10 families. One of the 10 families is Ruvain and his family. We're talking about a case where there was no Eruv Chatzeros in this chotzer yet. We're dealing with Shabbos Parshas Tzav. Shabbos Parshas Tzav, they're going to go ahead and make an Eruv Chatzeros to cover the chotzer, right? So they're getting together. Everybody should make a contribution. Or the Gabbai and the Rav are getting together. The Gabbai is handing over the box of matzahs to the Rav. The Rav is going to be mezaka in the Eruv for all the Bnei HaChotzer. The question becomes, do we need to cover Ruvain? Does Ruvain need to be part of this Eruv Chatzeros? Well, why not? Answer, because, we know that Ruvain has a Shabbos Sheva brachas to Shabbos. Ruvain is leaving for Shabbos. He's leaving on Thursday. He's going to Pennsylvania for Shabbos Sheva brachas in a beautiful hotel. He's not going to be here for Shabbos, not him, not his family. His house is going to be empty. His house is going to be empty. His house is a dira b'loi bailim. A dira b'loi bailim does not aser. But the Mechaber told us, when is this true? If Ruvain was Mesiach Das, ve'ein daiter lachzer lebeisa b'Shabbos, and he has no plans of coming back for Shabbos. Now, what does that mean? Does that mean that we need to get a signed piece of paper for Ruvain? I am hereby Mesiach Das, I'm not coming back for Shabbos? No. It means that we know he went away for a Shabbos Sheva brachas. If we know he went away for a Shabbos Sheva brachas, we know he's not coming back on Shabbos. We can assume that he was Mesiach Das and that he's not coming back for Shabbos. We have the right to make that assumption. If the facts on the ground are that it's very reasonably and clearly understood that Ruvain went away for Shabbos and he's not planning on coming back for Shabbos, then we can assume that he was Mesiach Das and ein daiter lachzer lebeisa b'Shabbos, and therefore he does not have to be part of the Eruv Chatzeros. There's an interesting bir halacha over here. Bir halacha dibra maschel im hisiach. And I'll read it to you. The Bir Halacha says, after Besug Yesham, even though if you look in the Sugya Mesechtes Erevin, and Daf Peivav Amud Aleph Isa, Dafka Bitoy Alva Benoiloi, what if we know that he went away not for a Shabbos Sheva brachas? We know that he went to one of his kids for Shabbos. And we know that his kids live close by. So his kids live within walking distance of the chotzer that we're dealing with. So technically, he could come back on Shabbos afternoon, right? From the sugya, it sounds like If we know that Reuven went to his daughter for Shabbos, then we could assume that he was Mesiach Das and he's not coming back. But if he went to his son for Shabbos, we cannot assume that he won't come back. Why is that? So the Biur Halacha says, Weiter to Amrinan, because we say, Kishahalach lishbais eitzel bitoi, if he went to his daughter for Shabbos, Mesiach daitoi midirasai, then we know he went to his daughter for Shabbos, he's not coming back. Veitzel benoi, but if he went to his son for Shabbos, Eino Mesiach, then we can't be sure that it was Mesiach Das and he's not coming back. Why? Shemet tiskoitet imai kalosai. Maybe he'll get into an argument with his daughter-in-law. And since he'll get into an argument with his daughter-in-law, he might turn around and come back on Shabbos. But what I want to bring out from this Biur Halacha is not so much that you see that Chazal were giving a little credence to the, I don't know what you want to call it, I don't want to say the common occurrence, but the Chazal were giving credence to the fact that, yeah, sometimes the father-in-law and the daughter-in-law will, get into a little bit of a spat, and maybe he'll turn around and come home. That's not the point that I want to bring out from the Biur Halacha. The point that I want to bring out from the Biur Halacha is that you see from the sugya that the Bnei HaChotzer are making assumptions. That's what we're doing here. We're not asking Reuven before he goes away for Shabbos. What we're doing is we're making assumptions. If he went away for a Shabbos Sheva Brachos, yeah, Reuven's not coming back. I know, he went to a Shabbos Sheva Brachos. If he went to his daughter, no, he's not coming back. He went to his daughter for Shabbos. If he went to his son, hold it, wait a minute. He went to his son for Shabbos and he's within walking distance. Maybe we can't be certain that he's not coming home. The Biur Halacha continues, and the Chavetz Chaim writes, Avalim hisiach daita behedya midirasai loisa Shabbos. But certainly, if Reuven clearly stated that he's going away for Shabbos and not coming back, Kagan she'aluhu, the people from the Chotzer asked Reuven, we heard you're going away for Shabbos. You're going away for good? You're not coming back on Shabbos? V'amar she'ein daita lachzeh l'dirasai l'Shabbosu, ein ha'yoser afilu halach lishbais eitzel b'noi v'hu adin acher. Then certainly, he's Mesiach Das, he's not coming back. I don't care where he went. I don't care if he went to his son. I don't care if he went to a stranger. It doesn't matter where he went. If we asked him and he said clearly he's not coming back, that means he was Mesiach Das. Okay. So the first halacha that we have over here in Siman Shin Ayin Aleph is just the very basic halacha that lays the groundwork for the rest of the Siman, which is a dira b'loy bailim does not aser. You have an empty home for Shabbos does not aser on the other Bnei HaChotzer. Even though it's owned by somebody, it doesn't matter. The Chotzer is not serving that entity this Shabbos. It's a dira b'loy bailim. Nobody's home. What does it mean, a dira b'loy bailim? The guy left. He's not coming back for Shabbos. He was Mesiach Das. He's not coming back for Shabbos, and he didn't leave anybody in the home. Says the Mechaber Weiter, top of Reish Shalom Ches Amud Aleph, B'amed dvarim amurim, when do we apply this halacha? B'Yisrael. When we're dealing with a Yid, we're dealing with Reuven, a Yiddish resident of the Chotzer. Aval Eina Yehudi, but let's say there's an Eina Yehudi who lives in the Chotzer. Now, we didn't really cover yet the halacha of an Eina Yehudi that lives in a Chotzer. So let's just lay that down before we even go weiter. When you have a Chotzer and there's an Eina Yehudi that lives in the Chotzer, well, that Eina Yehudi, Tony, is one of the residents. He's an entity that is being served by the Chotzer, right? So, multiple entities. We have an Eina Yehudi. What do you do with an Eina Yehudi? What you have to do with an Eina Yehudi is, you have to be maskir rishus from the Eina Yehudi. You have to rent out the Eina Yehudi's rishus, so that now you can incorporate his rishus into the Yeruvei Chatzeros. Now, do you have to sign a lease and pay current market value? No. You could go over to the Eina Yehudi and say, listen, this is complicated, it's Talmudic law, it's Jewish ritual stuff, but without getting crazy, let me just tell you, I need to give you a quarter, I need to give you $1, and technically speaking, you're leasing out your property to me. No, I'm not taking you to court and saying I have a lease with you and I could, go into your house and do whatever I want. It doesn't affect you in any way, shape, or form. For my Jewish law, I need to be able to say that I rented out your rishus, and that's it. That you give him the quarter, and fine. Why did Chazal do this? The reason Chazal did this is because they don't want you living in a chutzner with an Eina Yehudi. So Chazal made it uncomfortable for you. Chazal said, oh, you live in a chutzner with an Eina Yehudi? We don't want that. We don't like that. So we're going to inconvenience you. How are we going to inconvenience you? we're going to make your life complicated when it comes to Eruv Chatzeros. Now, I had to deal with this once, and let me tell you something, it was complicated. Because when I went to the Ein Yehudi and I tried to tell him that I need to be masker rishus from him, he got the heebie-jeebies. He was like, I don't know what's going on over here. I don't know what you're trying to do. I'm not comfortable with this. And he wasn't willing to accept the money and say that I was masker rishus from him. What I was able to do was, I asked a Shaila, this Ein Yehudi had a teenage daughter, and the Pesach told me if I could catch the teenage daughter once when she's not around her parents, she'll probably just go for it, because what does she care? She gets $1, right? If you could catch her and you could tell her, listen, Jewish law stuff, whatever, I need a member of your household, here's $1. I'm renting out your rishus, and she's an airhead. What does she care? She gets $1. So that's what I did, and that halachically is enough. She's a ben bayis, so to speak. She lives in the house, even though she's not the owner. That's okay. You can be masker rishus that way when push comes to shove. But bottom line, when you have an Ein Yehudi in the chutzner, you need to be masker rishus from the Ein Yehudi. So an Ein Yehudi resident in a chutzner is something that we need to deal with. So now, says the Mechaber, Bamed Dvar Mamurim, when we say that if a resident of the chutzner leaves and his house is a dirable bailim, now his house doesn't aser on the other bnei achotzer, that's when we're dealing with a yid. Babedra mamur be Yisrael. Aval Ein Yehudi, but if we're dealing with an Ein Yehudi, it gets a little bit more complicated. Aval Ein Yehudi, afilu halach lishbais be'ir acheres, even if he went away to a different city for Shabbos, oiser aleim, he is going to aser on the other bnei achotzer, ad sheyiskaru mimenu mekoymai, until you're masker rishus from him and you incorporate him into the Eruv Chatzeros. Im hu karov mahalach yom echad. If he's within the traveling distance of 1 day, if he's within 1 day's travel of the chotzer, that even if he left for Shabbos, he still asers on the bnei achotzer unless you're masker rishus from him and you incorporate him into the Eruv Chatzeros. Why? Says the Mechaber. I'll tell you why. Because when a Yid goes away for a Shabbos Sheva Brachos, right? Pashtus, he's not coming back on Shabbos. Yidden don't like traveling on Shabbos. Shabbos is not a travel day. They went away for Shabbos. Right? That's what we call it. They went away for Shabbos. They went to a Shabbos Sheva Brachos for Shabbos. So Pashtus, they're not coming back. But a goy, Shabbos is Tuesday. Doesn't matter, right? So a goy, you cannot assume that he went away for Shabbos, as long as he's within 1 day's travel. If he's further than 1 day's travel, then you could assume that he's not coming back. But if he's more than 1 day's travel away, then he also doesn't aser. Again, he's considered a dirable bailim. If he's more than 1 day's travel away, he's a dirable bailim. He doesn't aser on the bnei achotzer. Continues the Mechaber. There are those that say there is a more makel opinion that says that the din of an Ein Yehudi is the same as the din of a Yid. If he went away for the weekend to go to another chotzer, he doesn't aser, even if he's close by. And the Ramah says, V'chein nira ikar, I'm assuming this is the Ramah, V'chein nira ikar, that would seem to be the ikar halacha. As far as what the halacha is, if the Ein Yehudi comes back to the chutzner on Shabbos, I only come on Siman Shin Pei Gimel. Let's see the Mishnah Berurah. It says the Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Gimel. An Ein Yehudi, if he went away for Shabbos, even to another city, if he's within 1 day's travel, Oiser Aleim, he does aser on the other bnei chutzner afilu ervu b'neim. Even if he's part of the Eruv Chatzeros, meaning that I guess they were masker rishus from him. Oiser Aleim. Afilu ervu beinehem. I need to come back to that Mishnah Berurah, Rabbi say. Let's go back to first. Ois Katan Dalet. Im rachik yoiser, if he's more than 1 day's travel, v'avagav de barachik nami ikel amechirach shahalach b'choil atzamach lakan v'yavah b'Shabbos. The Mishnah Berurah is a little bit puzzled. The Mechaber is telling me that the Ein Yehudi is a problem if he's within 1 day's travel. Now, you want to talk about 1 day's travel in the context of a Yid. I get it. A Yid can't travel more than that, right? But a guy, so what? So he's in Florida. Maybe he'll fly into Newark on Thursday, and he'll come on Friday. Like, what's the big deal that he's more than 1 day's travel away? Avagav the Baruch Dami Ikalamecha Shahalach Bechoyel at Sabak Lakan V'Yave B'Shabbos. If he's far away, we don't have to be chayshish that he's going to return on Shabbos. It's cutting hay. The more makel opinion, shekab akum ayin b'tasha kasav dema akum raga lachzer lebeisay ba'isayim also l'kulayalma. The Taz says, look, if we know that this guy often goes away on day trips, so yeah, you saw him pack up his 4x4, before Shabbos and leave, but he does this all the time. He leaves and he comes back, so then he's gonna aser for Shabbos. When we say over here that the guy isn't gonna aser, that's when Tony told you, yeah, I'm going away for the weekend. Okay, he's going away for the weekend, then he doesn't aser. Oh, he's cutting vav. Bechotzer acheres, the Mechaber said in the more mekel yesh imrim that if an Eini Yehudi goes to a chotzer acheres, he's Einoi Oyser. Says the Mishnah Berurah, Ein Bir Halacha Shabiyarnu B'Shem Kama Paiskim. Many Paiskim say that Ein Lahakal Kiyam Be'ir Acheres, V'Loi B'Chotzer Acheres. When we want to be mekel by an Einoi Yehudi, it's only if you went away to another city, not if you went to another chotzer within the same city. Ois Katan Zayin. Einoi Oyser. The Kamoi be Yisrael Shalach Lishbais B'Makam Acher V'Siach Liba Midirasei Shechashvina Kilu Einoi Darsham Ba'Oisai Shabbos. The more Mekel opinion says that when an Einoi Yehudi went to a Chatzar Acheres and maybe an Ir Acheres, according to the bigger Chumrah in the Mekel opinion, right? That has to be Ir Acheres, not Chatzar Acheres. He doesn't aser the same way a Yid doesn't aser if he's Mesiach Das. And we consider it a dira b'loi bailim by an Eini Yehudi. Also, if you went to a chatzar acheres or to an ir acheres, we look at it as a dira b'loi bailim, and he doesn't asa. Let's go to Sif Beis. Says the Mechaber. Yisrael ben chatzar zu shahalach lishbais b'chatzar acheres ve'ein daitar lachzer b'Shabbos. So you have a Yid, you have Ruvain, who lives in chatzar A, and he went away to spend Shabbos in another chatzar. And when he left, we know that he had no das to come home, right? So this is our original case. Ruvain, the Yid, who lives in Chatzar A, went for a Shabbos Sheva brachas to Chatzar B. So he went, and we made a valid assumption that he's not coming back on Shabbos. But then what happened? Nimlach b'Shabbos v'chazar. And then guess what? He shows up Shabbos afternoon. Ruvain, what are you doing here? Didn't you go to a Shabbos Sheva brachas? Don't ask. I went to the Shabbos Sheva brachas. It's 98 degrees and humid, and the air conditioning quit, and we couldn't take it, so we walked home. So clearly, they left to go away, and their das was that they were going away for the entire Shabbos. Since their das was that they were going away for the entire Shabbos, we did not incorporate them in the Eruv Chatzeres, because we didn't have to. Halachically, he didn't aser on the other B'nai HaChotzer. But now he showed up on Shabbos afternoon. Does he now bring down the Eruv because he showed up on Shabbos afternoon? Says the Mechaber, no, he does not. He doesn't aser on the other B'nai HaChotzer. Says the Mishnah Berurah, why not? Because since when he left, his das was that he's not coming back. That means that in his mind, he was not living in this chotzer, this Shabbos. So his house became a dira b'loi bailim. And now that his house was a dira b'loi bailim at the onset of Shabbos, havalei Shabbos shehutra v'shavloi teyaser. So it's Shabbos kevet shehutra hutra, right? All of these things kick in Bein Hashmoshes on Erev Shabbos. Now, at the onset of Shabbos, Bein Hashmoshes going into Shabbos, we had a very valid assumption that this Yid is not going to be part of the Chotzer for this Shabbos. He was Mesiach Das. He went away for a Shabbos Sheva brachas for Shabbos. When Shabbos came in, his home was a dira b'loi bailim. So when Shabbos came in, his home did not aser on the other B'nai HaChotzer. Well, Shabbos gave it hutra hutra. Since at the onset of Shabbos, everything was halachically in order. At the onset of Shabbos, we had a good Eruv Chatzeros, and Ruvain did not have to be part of it, and everything was kosher v'yosher, right? Even though now he came back on Shabbos, he doesn't bring down the Eruv, because Shabbos came into hutra hutra. Okay, says the Mishnah Berurah weiter, Aval gabi akum, but let's say it wasn't Ruvain. Let's say this was Tony. And Tony went away for the weekend. Tony told us he's going away for the weekend. So we didn't worry about Tony. We weren't masking rishus from Tony. And now Tony shows up Saturday afternoon. Tony comes home Shabbos afternoon. He is going to bring down the Erev. By Ruvain, if Ruvain says he's going away for a Shabbos Sheva Brachas, that means he's Mesiach Das from his home for the entirety of Shabbos, and his home is called Adira B'lai Bailim for Shabbos. When Tony says he's going away for the weekend, that's not called his Siach Das. That doesn't mean that Tony is certain that he's not coming back home on Shabbos and his home is Adira B'lai Bailim. Why? What's the distinction in the context of this halacha between a Yid and an Eini Yehudi? Mishnah Berurah explains very beautifully. Shezeh Einei Elo B'Yisrael. You could only say this by a Yid. Shebemakom sheshoves beknisa Shabbos, by a Yid, where a Yid starts Shabbos, shehu lo yom menucha. For a Yid, Shabbos is not a travel day. Shabbos is a yom menucha. Mistamadaita or shaloi lakar. If a Yid says he's going away for Shabbos, there's no expectation that he's going to change his mind and decide to travel back on Shabbos. Shabbos is not a travel day. It's a Yom Menucha. If he shows up Shabbos afternoon, that's a real mind change. That's a paradigm shift, right? Something happened out of the norm, and he ended up turning around and coming home, right? But Tony shows up Shabbos afternoon, no biggie. It's not a major mind change. That means that that's really what he had in mind all along. Shabbos is a travel day like a Tuesday for an Eini Yehudi. So when a guy says, oh, I'm going away for the weekend, it doesn't mean anything. There's no meaning to it. It just means that's what he was thinking at that second. But he came back. Probably he was always thinking that he might come back. Even if he says, he comes back Shabbos afternoon and he sees that the Yidden are not happy, and he asks, one of his Jewish friends, like, what's going on here? Oh, don't ask. You messed us up with the Yeruvah Chatzeros. So he says, no, when I left on Friday, I seriously thought I'm not coming back until Sunday. Let me pivanu chayin. We don't go by the testimony of an Eini Yehudi. What an Eini Yehudi says doesn't have bearing for us in halacha over here. He showed up. That means that it was always a very strong possibility that he was going to show up. Okay. Siv Gimel, says the Mechaber. Echad min hashuk. This is a little bit more complex, but not so complex. Really, let's just pay attention here. Echad min hashuk. You have somebody who has a home in the Chatzar. He does own a home in the Chatzar. Ruvain. He owns a home in the Chatzar. But that's not his primary residence. Let's talk about a Chatzar that's upstate. Ruvain owns a home in this upstate Chatzar. It's a vacation home. Where does Ruvain live? In Borough Park. Ruvain lives in Borough Park. He doesn't live upstate, but he owns a home upstate. We're calling him Echad min Hashuk. We're not referring to him as one of the Bnei HaChatzar. You know why? Because that's not his primary residence. And in the context of Yeruvah Chatzeros, we would look at his upstate home as being a Dira B'lai Bailim. He's not there. He's not living there. Echad min Hashuk. Shahayaloi bayis b'chatzar. He owns a house in the Chatzar. Okay. I lost the place here. I'm sorry. Yeah. Umeis. And Nebuch, he died. V'hiniach reshusai le'echad mibnei HaChatzar. And he was moirish his home. His home was inherited by somebody who lives in the Chatzar. Right? So let's spell out the case. You've got this upstate Chatzar that has 10 homes in it. Yankel, owns a home in that Chatzar. Yankel lives in Borough Park. His primary residence is in Borough Park. He comes up to the upstate Chatzar, a few Shabbos a year. But typically speaking, Yankel's home in the upstate Chatzar is usually a Dira B'lai Bailim. That's not asering on the other Bnei HaChatzar. Now, Yankel has a son, Ruvain. Ruvain lives in the upstate Chatzar. Ruvain is a resident in the upstate Chatzar. Okay. Now, the upstate Chotzer makes it a Ruvei Chatzeros. Ruvain is included in the Ruvei Chatzeros because Ruvain is a primary resident in the upstate Chotzer. So Ruvain always contributes to the Ruvei Chatzeros, and Ruvain's home in the upstate Chotzer is covered by the Ruvei Chatzeros. Not Yankel's home. Yankel's home is not covered by the Ruvei Chatzeros because it doesn't have to be. Yankel's home is a Dir B'Leibaylam. Yankel lives in Borough Park. Yankel died. Who inherited Yankel's home? Ruvain. Ruvain inherited the home. Now Ruvain owns two homes in the upstate Chotzer. He owns his home, which was always covered by the Ruvei Chatzeros, and now suddenly he has taken ownership of his father's Yankel's home. How do we deal with this? Says the Mechaber. Echad men Ashuk. You have Yankel who lives in Borough Park. Shahayalai bayis b'Chotzer, but he has a vacation home in the upstate Chotzer, not covered by the Erev, because it was always a Dir B'Leibaylam. Umeis, Yankel died. The Niach Rishusai Echad b'Mnei Chotzer. He left over his home to Ruvain, his son, who lives in the Chotzer. Now Ruvain suddenly owns two homes in the Chotzer. How do we deal with this? Says the Mechaber, let's do the math. Im meis miba'od yom. When did Yankel die? If Yankel died before Shabbos, so Yankel died Wednesday, Yankel died Thursday, he died Friday afternoon, but he died before Shabbos. So his son Ruvain was Yarshin the home. He inherited the home before the onset of Shabbos. Im meis miba'od yom ein hazoicha oiser. So then Ruvain is not going to aser on the rest of the Bnei HaChotzer. Ruvain's new home that he just inherited from his father Yankel is not going to aser on the other Bnei HaChotzer. You know why? Ruvain has always been part of the Ruvei Chatzeros. So now Ruvain yarshined a second home in the Chotzer. Fine. But it became his home before the onset of Shabbos. The Ruvei Chatzeros kicks in halachically Ben Hashmoshes at the onset of Shabbos. When Ben Hashmoshes comes Friday evening, the Ruvei Chatzeros looks around. It sees that Ruvain suddenly owns two homes. It's okay. Ruvain's contribution to the Ruvei Chatzeros is going to cover his original home, and it's also going to cover his new home that he just inherited from his father Yankel. So if his father Yankel died before the onset of Shabbos, everything is fine. But let's say Yankel dies Shabbos evening. Yankel dies Friday night after the onset of Shabbos. And whatever, somehow they find out. So now it turns out that Ruvain yarshined his father's Yankel's home once Shabbos had already started. Well, if he yarshined it once Shabbos already started, the Erev already kicked in. Now, when the Erev kicked in, the Erev was only covering Ruvain's original home, right? The Erev didn't know that Ruvain suddenly had two homes. He didn't. At the onset of Shabbos, Ruvain only had one home. So when the Erev kicked in, the Erev covered Ruvain's original home. Yankel's home wasn't covered by the Erev. It didn't have to be. It was a Dir B'Leibaylam until Yankel died. Yankel died after the onset of Shabbos. Now what? Yankel's home is not covered by an Erev. Yankel was never part of the Erev. He didn't have to be. Dir B'Leibaylam. But now the home doesn't belong to Yankel anymore. It belongs to Ruvain. You want to cover it by Ruvain's contribution to the Erev? No. That was covering Ruvain's original home. It's not covering his present home. Now, could we look at it as a Dir B'Leibaylam? No, we can't look at it as a Dir B'Leibaylam. What do you mean? The Bailam are here. Ruvain is here in the Chotzer. Ruvain now found out that this house is his. He could decide to walk in and eat Shalashudas in that house. So we can't look at it as a Dir B'Leibaylam. So now we have a problem. Says the Mechaber, V'meis b'shechashecha oiser. Now this house is going to aser on the other Bnei HaChotzer. Afal pi she'erev hazoichi imayim, even though Ruvain joined in the Ruvei Chatzeros with the other Bnei HaChotzer, not going to help. It's not going to cover the home that Ruvain inherited on Shabbos. So again, the issue over here is a very basic issue. Yankel had a home in the Chotzer, in the upstate Chotzer. Yankel lives in Borough Park. Yankel's home in the upstate Chatzar is a dirable Bailam. It doesn't have to be incorporated in the Eruv Chatzeres. It doesn't aser on the other Bnei Chatzar. Yankel died. Who inherited his home? Ruvain. Ruvain lives in the Chatzar. Now Ruvain has 2 houses in the Chatzar. What do we do? Depends when Yankel died. If Yankel died before the onset of Shabbos, okay, Ruvain lives in the Chatzar. Guess what? He has 2 houses in the Chatzar. Ruvain had already joined the Eruv Chatzeres. Fine. His contribution to the Eruv Chatzeres will cover both houses. Everything is fine. But if Yankel dies after the onset of Shabbos, well then, when Shabbos kicked in, was Yankel's house covered by the Eruv Chatzeres? No, it didn't have to be. It was a dirable Bailam. Now it's no longer a dirable Bailam because now Yankel died. It was inherited by Ruvain. Ruvain's in the Chatzar. So now it's a dira with Bailam. Ruvain is there. It's not covered by Ruvain's contribution to the Eruv Chatzeres because that only covered his original house when Shabbos kicked in. When Shabbos kicked in, he only had 1 house. Now it should suddenly cover his new house that he just inherited. It can't do that. Eruv Chatzeres becomes activated at Bein Hashmashos. Once Shabbos started, the Eruv Chatzeres can't do anything anymore. So now you have this dira that's a dira with Bailam, Ruvain, and it's not covered by any Eruv Chatzeres. Now you have a problem. It asers on the other Bnei Chatzar. Says the Mishnah Berurah. Now some of you are smart, and some of you are realizing that there's a bomb kasha over here. And don't worry, the Bach asks the bomb kasha. But some of you, I hope, are realizing that there's a bomb kasha on this. But let's see the Mishnah Berurah. Says the Mishnah Berurah is cut and test. Echad min hashok. Mayri b'shaloi irev al habayis sheyesh lo b'chatzar. We're talking about a case, Yankel. He didn't join the Eruv Chatzeres for the house that he has in the Chatzar because it's a dirable Bailam. He doesn't need to. V'hu adinim hayadar b'chatzar v'lo erev. This halacha would also be germane to a case where Yankel actually does live in the upstate Chatzar, but he didn't join in the Eruv Chatzeres. Ela denaka echad min hashuk d'stama milsakenu. That would be the normal case. Dirshu dar b'shuk edamar v'labai sheish b'chatzar. Since Yankel lives in Borough Park, it makes perfect sense that he didn't join in the Eruv Chatzeres. He didn't have to. His house was a dirable Bailam. Eis kan yud eina zoicha oiser. If Yankel died before Shabbos, then Ruvain, who was zoicha now in the new house, he yarshed in the house, he's not going to answer on the other Bnei Chatzar. Bein shenichtas ladar ba'ilai. Even if he packed up his belongings on Friday night and he moved into his father's house, because his father's house is a nicer house and it now belongs to him, he still doesn't answer on the other Bnei Chatzar. Why? Because what do you mean? Ruvain joined in the Eruv Chatzeres, and this new house was his already before Shabbos, before the Erev kicked in. Even if the Eruv Chatzeres was made before Yankel died, it doesn't matter. Because the Erev activates at Bein Hashmashos. So at the moment of the activation of the Eruv Chatzeres, Ruvain had 2 houses. They're both covered. But if Yankel died after Shabbos began, then even if Ruvain promises the other Bnei Chatzar, I'm not going into the house, I'm going to leave it locked up, I'm not dealing with it until after Shabbos, it doesn't matter. It's still a dira with Bailam, because it's owned by Ruvain, and Ruvain is there in the Chatzar. And it's not covered by any Eruv Chatzeres, so it's going to aser. Mikamoka mikri dir b'bailim. Kevichu dar ba'isa chatzar. Ice cut in Yod Gimel. Aval pisha erev al beisei sheish la b'chatzazu. Even though Ruvain joined in the Eruv Chatzeres for his original house, it doesn't help. Ice cut in Yod Dalet einem oil. The Eruv Chatzeres doesn't help for the new house that he just inherited. Kevin de be'es ben hashmasha shu ozman k'niyas erev loy haya ba'isha loy. Because when the erev kicked in, Bein Hashmashos going into Shabbos, Ruvain didn't own that house. And Chala Erev al Bayezeh. Now, I told you that there's a bomb kasha over here. Yeah, there's a bomb kasha. This bomb kasha goes back to Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Ches. What did we say in Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Ches? We said in Mishnah Berurah Ois Katan Ches, going on Ois Katan Ches. On going back on Sif Beis. We said, what if you have a Yid who lives in the Chatzar? Ruvain lives in the Chatzar. Ruvain went away on Erev Shabbos to go to a Shabbos Sheva Brachos, right? He's Mesiach Das. He's not coming back for Shabbos. Does he have to be part of the Eruv Chatzeros? No. His house is a Dira B'lai Bailam. Then he shows up on Shabbos because the Ekedish he died where he was. Does he ask her on the other B'nai HaChatzer? No. Why not? Shabbos Kevich Hutra Hutra. When the Erev kicked in on Ben Hashmashas going into Shabbos, everything was copacetic. Everything was hunky-dory, right? Reuven was gone. He went away for Shabbos. His house is a Dira B'lai Bailam. He came back on Shabbos? Okay, I don't want to know about it. Shabbos Kevich Hutra Hutra. Well, how about in this case? Yankel died when? Yankel died on Shabbos. That's the case where we're saying we have a problem. But wait a second. What was the halacha at Ben Hashmashas? At Ben Hashmashas, Yankel was alive in Borough Park. At Ben Hashmashas, Yankel's house was a Dira B'lai Bailam. So when Shabbos kicked in by Ben Hashmashas, everything was hunky-dory. Yankel's house did not have to be covered by an Eruv Chatzeros. It was a Dira B'lai Bailam. Yankel died Friday night and his house was inherited by Reuven. Suddenly now it's a Dira B'Bailim because Reuven's in the Chatzar and he now owns the house. So what? Shabbos Kevich Hutra Hutra. I hope somebody caught the kasha. The Bach asks this kasha and causes a whole kerfuffle amongst the Achrayim working to be metaretz this kasha. There's a Taz that gives a very cryptic answer that the Gra tears apart. And not only the Gra, everybody's matama on the Taz. They don't know what the Taz is saying, how the Taz is trying to answer the kasha. But there's a Magen Avram that covers the kasha. And basically what the Magen Avram wants to say is that this rule of Shabbos Kevich Hutra Hutra is not an absolute. You have to look at the application of that rule in different cases. So the distinction that the Magen Avram wants to make over here is an interesting distinction. He says in Sif Beis, what's the case? In Sif Beis, the case is Reuven lives in the Chatzar. He went away for a Shabbos Sheva Brachas. We made a halachically solid, very valid assumption that Reuven is gone. He was Mesiach Das from his house, and he's gone for Shabbos. And we did not incorporate him into the Eruv Chatzeros because his dira is a Dira B'lai Bailam. Now, like the Mishnah Berurah said in Ois Kat Ches, Ruach Acheres Imoi. Something completely out of the ordinary happened. There was a blackout by the Shabbos Sheva Brachas. The Ekedish quit, and Reuven came back home. That's an oisnam. That's an aberration. That's something that was completely unexpected. Shabbos Kevich Hutra Hutra. In our case over here, where at the onset, on the onset of Shabbos, the house belonged to Yankel. It was a Dira B'lai Bailam. Yankel lives at Borough Park. It wasn't covered by the Eruv Chatzeros. Now, on Shabbos, Yankel died. It became inherited by Reuven, who lives in the Chatzar. It's true that that is something that is, Baruch Hashem, totally unexpected. Nobody saw that coming, right? But here's the problem. Reuven lives in the Chatzar. Reuven now owns this house. It's here in the Chatzar, and he owns it. It's too likely, it's too plausible, it's too reasonable to assume that Reuven might decide to walk into the house on Shabbos. I now own that house. Let me see what, I haven't been in there in a while. Let me see what condition it's in. Let me see what's going on over there. We can't apply the rule of Shabbos Kevich Hutra Hutra because there's too strong of a chash that Reuven may come to make use of the house on Shabbos. And once Reuven makes use of the house on Shabbos and he owns it and it's his, it's going to make Erev problems, and therefore we cannot apply the rule of Shabbos Kevich Hutra Hutra. There's more to say about this. This is high level, an easy way to explain it. Okay, thank you so much for joining me for Limud HaTorah. This is Limud HaTorah should be Megan on God's Klal Yisrael. The Baruch Hashem should send Yeshua Sefer Parnas and Shaduchim to all those in need. We should be zeichet to see the BS Gal Tzedek. Memher v'yameinu amen. Be well.